Coghill.
Here.
Mr. Gambiani.
Here.
Mr. Matheson.
Here.
Mr. Paulson.
Here.
Mrs. Swanson.
Here.
Mr. Vroman.
Here.
Mrs. Intihar.
Here. Mrs. Dalkus, would you lead us in the pledge? Sure.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We open up our meeting with public comment on agenda items, and we do have one person in the audience who is asked to speak on a non-agenda item relating to our high schools. Does any board member object if we allow this person to speak at this time? Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, here.
My name is Bruce Anderson. I live at 1231 Midwest Lane in Wheaton, and I'm here representing the Wheaton-Warrenville South High School Classic Show Choir. John Burlace, director of the Classics, has asked me to read this letter to you. Dear District 200 Administration and School Board, on Friday, March 7th and Saturday, March 8th, Wheaton-Warrenville South High School will be hosting its 7th annual Choral Classic. 25 middle schools and high schools from 5 states will be traveling to our school to compete in show choir and vocal performance competitions. Approximately 1,500 students will appear on stage those 2 days in a display of talent that is truly amazing. The Choral Classic is recognized as one of the premier show choir events in the country, and more than 4,000 people will be in attendance. The 2-time National Championship Classics, an extracurricular choir, serves as the public ambassador for an extensive choral program at Wheaton-Warrenville South that also includes a second competitive show choir, the all-female group Esprit. Esprit has been competing for 8 years and has also won top honors at many competitions. We hope that you will attend this amazing event as our guests on Friday, March 7th and Saturday, March 8th. Please give your name at the welcome desk and you will be given a bracelet for entry for both days. And I just wanted to add my own sentiments. As a parent, I could not be happier to have my son be part of a group like this. I had the opportunity to chaperone the group at one of their recent out-of-state competitions, and I've never seen a more polite, focused, and dynamic group of kids in my 24 years of parenting. The aspect of this group that is most impressive is not all the championships they win or the fact that they are considered one of the top groups consistently in the nation. It's that they make such a lasting impression on those they compete against. I witnessed Mr. Burlace urging the group to do random acts of kindness throughout the weekend. Everything from encouraging and complimenting their fellow competitors to something as simple as buying a smoothie for someone standing in line behind them during the lunch break. I had a flood of unsolicited compliments from parents and students from other schools about how respectful, humble, and supportive our kids were. Any group that can win the championship of an event, as well as the sportsmanship award, like they did that weekend, is a group that has had a real impact. These kids are wonderful representatives of our community and we should all be very proud of them. So please take us up on our offer to attend this upcoming event and cheer on these wonderful kids. So thank you, and I'd like to leave you with this letter.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Long?
Harold Lons. I just here to say a couple things about the $10 million bond issue. I see on the you also be approving, along with the bond issue, about $77,000 of expenses related to the issuance. I think it would be nice to hear all the other expenses that's involved with issuing the bonds for the other board members and the public at whole, which I'm sure there's fees and other things, underwriting fees and so forth, that's taken out of the proceeds. Thank you.
Mary Ann Tom?
board will finalize the issuance of $10 million bonds. It is unfortunate that this did not get put out to referendum to let the people paying the bill decide this. But it's always a crisis, it seems. It always is a scenario that we have to act right now. There's no time. No time to plan things out. We can only react. We can only spend money. The charts and graphs and budgets all seem convoluted to make it impossible to make heads or tails as to what is true, what makes sense, what doesn't. The data seems skewed many times, but there's no backup to substantiate the data. And it seems like you cherry pick who you want to compare yourself to justify the borrowing and spending that gets done. The board and district continue to spend above your means, but have made no effort to make cuts and save money. Expect sometimes when we cut programs from the students, like B Sports, or several years ago there was threatening to cut art and music. I thought education funding was for the students, not to pay for outrageous benefits for all administrators and car allowances and 7 to 29% raises for technology department and bloated management and retirement dinners, vacation day buybacks, dollars spent for lobbying groups, community engagement. I don't know if the district and board has looked to outsource more, to relieve us of overhead, or to rent facilities instead of always building new. It seems like all we can do is think of how we can take more money from people without being responsible to cut cost and stop the bleeding. It is not unreasonable of me to expect that you spend your money in the responsible manner that I spend mine. In fact, you should be more conscientious because you are spending other people's money. Those in the community that think you are doing a good job and don't think they're paying too much should feel free to cut a check to the district for $1,000, $5,000, or $10,000 extra if they choose. Maybe the board and district should solicit funds from the citizens that support you and feel that you are spending the money responsibly. But as informed as a citizen as I am, and the data I have collected over the years tells me that there's a credibility and transparency issue at times. You haven't always owned up to it. You have not owned up to things that have been done in the past. In fact, when board members are looking back and blaming a board from 15 years ago, you're not owning things and choices that you've made all these years that have put us in this position. And until you own it, you cannot move forward and do the right thing and get us on the track financially. And you have no right to ask me or to take more money from me.
Mrs. Shaw?
Hi, I'm Jan Shaw from Wheaton. When you put up this bond, we were told that we had 30 days to force a referendum with 1% of the taxpayers signing it. There'd be 6,000 people in 30 days in this weather. Impossible. We did put up a go petition, however, just to try and see if we get the word out that we are doing a bond. The petition reads, we the undersigned demand that the Wheaton-Warrenville CUSD 200 let the people paying the bill decide on the $10 million bond via a vote or referendum. And I do have some signatures of the list of people who signed this and a whole slew of comments I'll hand over there in a minute. Let's see what we have here. You see, the problem is you probably do actually need this money for building maintenance. And the reason is because you haven't been doing building maintenance as part of your operating budget. You haven't been doing it as part of the operating budget because you're spending that on other things. As Mr. Matheson laid out last month, or 2 weeks ago, the last meeting, he said that there's two ways that you do tax levy. One of it has to do with operating costs, and that's capped based upon inflation and new growth in the district. And the second part is debt services, which basically mean referendum. So the taxpayers are supposed to have a say when we do this. However, there are certain opportunities, to use his word, that you can do debt services for things like capital needs without going to the taxpayer. I don't understand this loophole, but you can do it. And so you're going to the taxpayers to get building maintenance. He also made a point about the fact that we have old buildings. Well, over the last 30 years, every building in the district, except for this one and Jefferson, has been renewed. Things have a life expectancy, a rough maybe 20 years, maybe 50, depending on the quality you put in. Boiler systems, everything has a life expectancy. With 22 buildings, you should be planning on spending some money every year out of operating budgets for doing the mechanical maintenance on buildings. Okay? The reason you don't have the money in there is the percentage that's going towards salaries has gone up. The number of administrators, the number of teachers has, especially administrators and support staff, has gone way up over the last 1 or 2 decades. The amount of money has gone up faster than inflation. You put in excess money into benefits. I see no pushback on unfunded mandates. Things like Common Core. I sat here and I listened at a legislative breakfast when they asked you, what is Common Core going to cost the district? Can you afford it? And somebody here said, oh yeah, no problem, we'll get you the data. We haven't seen any of the data. I even put in a FOIA for that data and was told that you don't have the data and you have no intentions of collecting the data. You're just going to do the mandate because that's the things you do. My goodness, you're being mandated to spend a fortune and you aren't even curious as to what it's going to cost you before you spend it? This is why this district is way behind money. And the reason that you have to go to us for extra money for doing building maintenance is because you've misspent the other money on things that are wants, unfunded mandates, and higher than necessary raises. And then what you do is you take the necessities that you can put onto debt and you do that. And as a result, as Mr. Matheson said, we're always going to be in debt. As soon as you start paying off a bond, you take off more so that the debt stays right up there. You know, you've lived beyond your means for at least 2 decades now. And many of you have been on the board for the bulk of that time, so don't blame the previous board. I know in '99 they said they were going to spend part of the existing funds on buildings, but they didn't spend it all. Somehow you blew through all of it and then some, and you didn't start looking at cutting anything until you literally ran out of other people's money. It's time to look for cuts before you start spending more. And I know you're talking tonight about technology. That's another one. Why do you need technology? Do you need it because of Common Core? Is it actually going to improve the student stuff? At the last Engage 200, you had us do a thing with 100 pennies. How would we spend it? I wouldn't spend any of that. I don't accept your premise that more money is going to make our students any better. I don't accept that premise at all. You see, because what really qualifies our students as fantastic is the community that they come from. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Now we're moving on to our action items on our agenda. First of all is the approval of financial advisory agreement with PMA. May I please have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Broman, second by Mrs. Swanson. Does staff have any information to provide for us?
Yes, I'm going to have a just a brief summary presentation from Mr. Farley and from PMA here this evening on not only this item but the next 3 items as well. You know, they all obviously are coincide with one another. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farley for just a couple minutes and let update the board where we sit as of this morning. Mr. Farley.
Thank you, Dr. Harris.
Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. As the board's aware, this morning the bond sale was held through a live auction process, and it was interesting to watch it. I've seen them before, but it's interesting when it's your own district and watching the action and all of the process go through. But as Dr. Harris mentioned, tonight we've got the financial advisory agreement with PMA. They served as our financial advisor in the past. Chapman and Cutler, who is our bond counsel, is a preeminent law firm that handles bonds in the state of Illinois, as well as the resolution to approve the bonds sale that occurred this morning. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Lewis to come forward, and he's just going to, he's got a few slides to run through the process this morning and what occurred.
Thank you, Bill. So I have about 3 or 4 slides to run through here tonight. The first is a summary of the results. The final par amount was 9.5 million, a little bit more than that. I know you authorized up to 10 million. And the reason why you didn't sell 10 million is because bonds oftentimes are sold at a premium in the market, where the investor, once the interest rate is actually above the yield, so because they're buying the bond from you at a rate that's above the current market yield, they pay you a premium. So you actually have gross proceeds of just under $10 million, which is what you authorized. The bonds will be delivered on March 26. Of course, all is subject to your approval. Your payments are October 1st, 2020 through 24. Just as we had structured before, you have 5 consecutive payments, which fits into your current debt service extension base.
The bonds are callable on October 1st of 2022, so the last 2 payments could be refunded at that time for whatever purpose it may be, savings or perhaps for some other purpose. The bonds are tax exempt, which is of course taking advantage of what's allowed to you under the tax code. You're able to sell them at a subsidized interest rate, essentially. And they're bank qualified. Remember, one of the reasons we kept it at $10 million because then you could designate them as bank qualified. And that benefit I was able to quantify probably has saved you about 0.3 to 0.35% based off a non-bank qualified sale that sold last week for a comparably rated Illinois school district. Your rating is AA- by S&P. You also have a AA3 by Moody's, but you only need to use 1 rating for a bond issue of this size. The good news is that S&P assigned a positive outlook to your bond rating, which essentially means it's likely in the next couple of years that they will raise your rating, and the next rating would be a straightforward AA. What they just needed to see if 1 or 2 more audits of the information that you guys continue on this path in which you started of having balanced budgets, actually adding the fund balance, maintain your fund balance policy. I was able to, Bill did a good job communicating to that, and I was able to testify from my own presence at your meetings that the fund balance policy is a tool that is actively used at your board meetings. And a lot of your financial discussions now surround maintaining compliance with your fund balance policy. So they're very pleased about that. And we were the financial advisor. Your winning underwriter, winning bidder was Raymond James. The next slide shows you how that was determined. You actually could see a replay of this if you wanted to. Bill could provide that to you if you wanted to see it. He had 5 different firms submit bids today. The number of bids right here, you had 42 between the firms. Just a reminder of how this process, or maybe the first time I've discussed this process with you. I know Dr. Harris and Bill have seen that before. The firms, 15 minutes before the due time, which was 10:30 this morning, have an opportunity to submit a bid. When they submit the bid, they find out what position they're in. They don't know by how much, they just know what position they're in. They don't know who's in front of them, who's behind them, they don't know how many firms are bidding. They just know whether they're first, second, third, or what have you. And the first bid today was by Piper Jaffray at a 2.75, which was good because our estimates that we ran the numbers at your last meeting was at a 2.89, so we were already right off the bat better than the estimate. And then some other firms started jumping in, and you had quite a bit of movement. And the feature that we add to our auction sales is called the 2-minute rule. If anybody moves in the first place with less than 2 minutes remaining, it extends the final bid time 2 minutes from that point. So if you've ever been on an eBay auction, if somebody jumps in at the last second, they get it. It doesn't get extended. That can't happen on your bonds. So you have these 2 firms were really vying for your bonds, and I think we had 14 extensions, if I recall. It ended up about 10, 12 minutes after the original sale time is supposed to end. So every time they improve their bid, of course, that benefits you with the lower interest rates. You can see, ultimately, they were very close at the end, but finally one of them, Bank of Oklahoma Securities, just threw the towel and said, okay, we're done. So your winning bidder was Raymond James at the 2.45. Again, our estimate at the January meeting was a 2.89. And remember that chart I always bring all the time, the interest rates? You really sold at a good time because you ended up with an average of about 10 basis points above that AAA rated index because the demand for municipal bonds is really high right now, especially for bank qualified bonds because there's really a dearth of supply. There's not a lot out there to satisfy the demand. So you were able to benefit from that. This is how it fits into your overall chart right here. These are your outstanding non-referendum bonds. This is the new issue that fits right into here. So you utilize most of your remaining margin, and then it opens up here down the road if you choose to do this again at some point. When we met with the Finance Committee, I think this number we estimated here was about 13 million, and you ended up at 11,993,000. So the benefit of the market improving, also the benefit of the supply being so low that we had estimated you'd probably be about 0.4 to 0.5 over that index. And you ended up only 0.1 or so, so that's very good. And I think that's the presentation. I'll take any other questions you have at this time.
Just probably Could you go back a couple charts where you had the numbers on? So one more. There. Okay, so we're going to yield approximately $10 million.
Correct.
And that's what we end up with. Okay, so our payback of those with interest or without interest, we're going to be paying back what level? What's the actual principal on the bonds? Wasn't it 9 something?
9,540,000, I think. is
Okay,
what it was.
so there's roughly 400 and some thousand or 460 between the payback and the money we're getting. That's the premium you're calling.
Yeah, you're getting, the underwriter's paying you that premium.
Okay, and just to kind of get a handle on the cost again, the cost of doing this was approximately how much?
Your cost of issuance are approximately $140,000. The underwriter, the true interest cost, this number here, when the underwriter is bidding their true interest cost, they're bidding their interest rates and their fee. That's included in the true interest cost. The underwriter's fee ended up being about $56,000.
Okay, and then the other was the other fees for the bond counsel, et cetera.
Yeah, the other fees, the underwriter's fee was included in the true interest cost, and the other major fees are included in the 2 documents you're approving tonight. The other fees after that were the rate agency fee, was $13,000.
And technically, that's coming out of the premium.
Right.
Okay, so in summary then, we're getting right around 10 million, we're paying back in principal 9.54.
Correct.
Okay, and that's with the fees in and out and everything. And the rate that we're paying is again 2.45.
Correct.
Which is, again, what was the rate you suggested that you thought it might
We
be?
estimated in January is going to be 2.89. When we were out the finance committee in December, it's probably in the 3-ish.
So almost a half a point less than we thought it would be when we first started this process.
Correct.
What's that savings, about $2 million? Is that what you pointed out?
It's about $1 million lower.
$1 million?
Yeah, we'd estimated that it would be about $3 million of interest. It ended up being about $2 million.
Okay. And these are now done, that's a done deal.
It's done subject to your approval.
Oh. All right. Thank you.
And this was based upon the credit rating we received from Moody's too, at what, AA positive, or AA minus positive?
Yeah, S&P, right?
S&P. So that also factored into the interest rate as well.
Correct.
Any other comments from board members?
Just a quick thank you to the professionalism and good services we've had from PMA.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, is there any other discussion then?
I'm just disappointed a couple of the commentators weren't here to hear this presentation.
Okay, Mrs. Sender, will you call the roll then?
Mr. Vroman,
Yes?
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Matheson,
What are we voting on? Are we voting or calling roll? Or
We're voting.
The vote is...
I'm approving this.
This is the financial advisor.
this is the advisory agreement with PMA.
Okay. Okay.
Do I need to?
And again, we just saw a presentation. What is the substance of this agreement? I'm sorry.
It's our financial advisory agreement with PMA. This is one of the fees that's incorporated with the sale of the bonds.
So it's to prove, in effect, that fee that we were just
Paying
talking
it,
about.
yeah.
Ask me the question.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
No.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mrs. Inchahar,
Yes, motion passes 6-1.
get it?
No, it's not.
We're having trouble voting online.
No, it should be
It's coming now.
Is it coming?
It was not responding to my clicks.
Ah, there we go. Okay, board members, please vote online.
Sorry.
Okay, our second action item is approval of an engagement letter with Chapman and Cutler for Bond and Disclosure Council. May I have a motion, please?
I so moved.
Moved by Mr. Vroman,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Coghill. Does staff have any information to provide on this? Pretty self-explanatory what we got.
Just briefly, this is again one of the fees associated with the bond sale.
Any discussion? All right, Mrs. Centerwood, call the roll, please, and board members, please vote online.
Mr. Vroman,
Yes.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
No.
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mrs. Interhart,
Yes, motion passes. Our third action item is approval of a resolution providing for the, sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry, this is yours.
Approval of a resolution providing for the issue of bonds of the district for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund and providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds. A proposal has been received from Raymond James and Associates Incorporated for the purchase of the district's general obligation working cash fund bonds to be issued by the district pursuant to Article 20 of the school code, and that the Board of Education would consider the adoption of a resolution providing for the issue of said bonds and the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest thereon. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Paulson has to read the resolution itself. I'm sorry. A second.
Okay, resolution providing for the issue of $9,540,000 general obligation limited tax school bonds, Series 2014 of Community Unit School District Number 200, DuPage County, Illinois, for the purpose of increasing the working cash fund of said school district and providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Now may we have a motion, please?
I so move.
Moved by Mr. Roman,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Swanson. Is there any discussion? I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Sender, will you call the roll, and board members, please vote online.
Mr. Vroman,
Yes.
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
No.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mrs. Interhart,
Yes, motion passes. We have action item number 4.
I don't have Jim Matheson.
Jim, have you voted online?
No, I did.
Oh, thank you.
I was in
All right. Ready? All right, approval of a resolution regarding the intention to restructure bond and interest debt.
We'll comment briefly on this. Again, this was discussed at the last board meeting, that it was the intent of the board in approving the sale of these bonds, that when those other bonds become callable, that we will reorganize those and restructure those at the given time. And this resolution just documents that is our intent moving forward, to make sure that the taxpayers in the community understand the best we possibly can a level debt service over time.
Okay. Mrs. Sender, do you have something to read?
No.
Says I do.
This is just a resolution.
All righty, may I have a motion, please?
I so moved.
Moved by Mrs. Swanson,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Paulson. Any discussion?
So
Mr. Matheson.
this,
Oh, okay, Mr. Paulson.
So this is essentially our taking to the wall of our commitment, to use your term from a few meetings ago, that we're going to refinance and when the time is right. How do we, board might change over the last 2 of these things, how do we remember this if it's not taped to the wall?
I can just assure you that in past practice, the board has done this in the past. Most recently, when the Hubble referendum occurred, and the board pledged to retake the sale property proceeds. And that was different administration, several different board members, and the board kept its commitment at that time to take those sale proceeds. You know, we can only bank on this board passing this resolution. It certainly is in good faith that future boards, and hopefully many of you will be there when the time comes down the road, to be able to take action on this. And I can assure you from a staff perspective, we will certainly continue to keep this in the forefront on every financial presentation into the near future to make sure that we are conscious of that debt service over time. That's, it is a pledge only as good as this current board. However, there has been past practice where boards have, honored that commitment.
Also, PMA has an incentive to remind us.
You are correct, as our financial advisors, and quite frankly, that's their fiduciary responsibility in all seriousness to advise us in that capacity and remind us, and I certainly don't want to speak for Mr. Lewis, but I do know, Mr. Farley and I meet with staff, with PMA, Mr. Lewis and his staff on a regular basis to reevaluate where we're at and always make sure we're in the best fiscal situation.
The first one's in 15 months from now, so.
That's correct.
So it's
It's on the calendar.
Mr. Benson, would you?
Yes, I just want to clarify one of the reasons we're talking about this, and that is that looking in the schedules that were within the audit report, without regard to the bonds we just sold, which are really down the road, there is no current payment on any of those at this point. But in the year 2014, we have about just short of $17 million debt service requirement, principal and interest coming up. That number continues roughly at that amount for the next 3 years. In 2017, June 30th, 17, it jumps to about 18 million, then 19 million, 20, 23 in the year 2020. And that's the year for sure we need to be there. And I think if we look at these dates, to memorialize the why, is that, that's a big jump on the community. That's basically in excess of 20%, about 20% increase in that year. So, and that would be a direct tax increase for that debt service component of the rate. So, future boards, listen to us now, as I say. Thank you.
Mr. Rowley.
Yeah, I also had an opportunity this afternoon to review the debt repayment schedule that we currently face and compare it to what the resolution addresses as far as leveling it out. Not only does it ease the debt burden on our district and relieve the pressure on our residents with respect to tax increases, but it helps us come up with a viable budget since we don't have to meet those extra added interest payments. So it's something we're not going to forget our obligation under this resolution.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, do you want to? I just, I'm a big believer in that the communities have to continue to invest in themselves in order to move forward in the future. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the community for allowing us to move forward by selling these bonds. And I think that the resolution is part of that sort of mutual promise, and that we have had the opportunity to move quickly, as we've heard tonight, to take advantage of a very good market, but anticipating that in the future, we're going to have the opportunity to also help relieve some of the burden on taxpayers. So certainly understand the taxpayers who are concerned about the burden, but by the same token, in terms of taking care of our district and investing in it, this is a great opportunity to do that now, and then this resolution helps us to, in the future, sort of pay back to the taxpayers in that sense. So.
And I would hope, obviously, the good news, Jim, as you mentioned, about the potential savings impact on the budget. Dr. Harris and I, we had a lot of discussions about monies being earmarked for facilities and planning, and over the last 6 years, we've averaged around $300,000. Obviously, if we're going to enjoy these savings, I'm hoping that during the budgeting process this year, that number is more like $2 million, $3 million. We got to find it somewhere, so that as we're moving forward, this really becomes part of that discipline that we have to earmark money much greater than what we're doing today. I know there's trade-offs with other things. I don't know the insides and outs of how that happens, with what the trade-offs are, but I would hope anyway that we continue to be diligent about how we can earmark bigger numbers, if you will, in the budget, so that we can, again, continue to be prepared for those maintenance items going forward. So that would be my only wish.
Any other comments?
I have one follow-up question on that. 300,000, I'm just confused a little bit about that. That's all that we have in the budget, or?
That was an average over 6 years.
Really?
Some years were less than that, some have been more. So, and, over the last couple of years, we have increased that. Now, it's not clearly at what Mr. Gambiani has suggested. However, this past year, we had, I think the exact number was 757,000, which we used for capital. That was a significant change from 5 years ago where it was 150,000. So, we have targeted that, even in our planning over time, we have targeted in, capital monies. And certainly it's always contingent upon our budget obligations and other expenses that we have in front of us.
I'd like to see that item when we do the budget as we approach this next year, to kind of highlight that item if we could, to make sure that we understand what the dollar amount being put away is.
Any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Sender, will you call for the vote, please?
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
No.
Mr. Vroman,
Yes?
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mrs. Intihar,
Yes. Motion passes.
Jim?
You got it.
Jim, you asked me.
You're self-directed.
Our next item of business is approval of the Illinois, the ISBE Maintenance Grant Round 2. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Vroman,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Paulson. Does the staff have any information to share?
Sure, and just a brief summary on this item. We had an opportunity, a very short-term window here, to seek more state monies for maintenance. Because all of the monies were not used in the first round, the state has provided a second round, but it has to be tied, in this case particularly, to safety issues. And the only building right now where we have life safety amendment, which is Jefferson, hence why we are recommending to the board approve this application. We'll submit it as soon as possible and hopefully be able to receive this money to replace the fire alarm system in that building, which we have indicated in life safety work is antiquated as well. Mr. Farley, anything else to add to that?
Just that last year the state did the same thing in the second round. I think they awarded 4 districts for emergency, which is the #1 priority, and then life safety was around 100, 120, and then the next priority item had 0. So obviously applying with that life safety factor is definitely helpful, and we're hoping we can do this project for 50 cents on the dollar.
Very good. Comments?
Just to understand what you said, hoping to do it for 50 cents on the dollar. This is a project we need to do with or without this grant.
That's correct. We're going to be doing this out of our O&M budget next year, so there's the first capital project on the list for next year's budget.
Okay, and then I heard the news today that the state is way behind on their revenue, compared to a year ago. Does that have bearing on this grant, do you believe?
I believe the grant money is bonded by the state of Illinois, so they've got it through bond proceeds available for use by school districts. So the money is there.
I'd just like to, I looked at all the life safety amendments on Jefferson, and I support the fact that this is the right particular line item. Depending on what we do at Jefferson in the short term or long term, this individual item can be taken out of the building, relocated, partially relocated, so I think it's still a worthwhile investment. It's something that's been on our list since 1992, I think it is, so I think this is the right item to pick on that list.
Any other comments? Okay, Mrs. Senator, will you call the roll, and board members, please vote online.
Mr. Vroman,
Yes?
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
Yes.
Mrs. Intihar,
Yes, motion passes. Okay, there is no further business to come before the board in this particular special meeting, so I'm asking for a motion to adjourn, please.
I move that we adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Bowman,
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Coghill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. We'll now come to order, I'm sorry, Committee of the Whole will now come to order. Mrs. Sender, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coghill. Here. Mr. Gambiani.
Here.
Mr. Matheson.
Here.
Mr. Paulson.
Here.
Mrs. Swanson. Here. Mr. Vroman.
Here.
Mrs. Intihar.
Here. Mrs. Wayakina, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. We need a motion to please suspend the rules and adjourn to a workshop setting.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Vroman,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Gambiani. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We're now in workshop setting. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Mrs. Intihar. Good evening, board members. We have a great work session this evening at Committee of the Whole on two very, very important topics in the learning and teaching arena. The first one is on an update on curricular issues, instructional improvements, with a special focus on technology integration. And all of you have noticed that you have a trusted assistant with you this evening. And one of the models that we use in classrooms across the district is to have coaches, where you're going to have your own personal coach here on this first item this evening, and I'm going to turn over to Faith in a minute. The second item that we'll get to in a little while has to do with intervention prevention programs. Again, it was very important, I believe, that the board understand where the district is at currently in relation to one of the most prevalent issues in our DuPage County right now, which is the heroin epidemic, and we're going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it in context of what's going on in our classrooms and in those arenas. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Dahlquist, and she's going to lead us through this first session on instruction. Mrs. Dahlquist.
Thank you. It's always great to be able to come and talk about curriculum and instruction. But I am going to change it up a little bit tonight. Usually I spend a lot of time talking and presenting, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the things that we're doing, and then I'm going to have you all interact with information and resources and kind of demonstrate some of the instructional practices that we're using in some of our classrooms. You have a handout that is very brief on curriculum updates. It has the exciting title of Curriculum Update 2013-14 in your folders. And I'm not going to go through and list and read all of those things that are on there, but I wanted to highlight some of the changes that are happening. We are in the process of building lots of systems of support so that our curriculum is all aligned. Yes, we're still updating courses and we're writing standards and we're writing assessments, but what is looking a little bit different is that we are creating frameworks for multi-grades to be able to use. One of those examples is a speaking and listening rubric that we're working at the high school level that science classes and history classes and English classes would all be able to use to talk about what is a good presentation or what is a good part of a discussion. With our reading framework, which is now kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, we've talked about what is really good instructional practices all the way through. So as we implement the new Common Core and we look at our reading and writing and language, there's alignment from kindergarten through 8th grade and talking about that. This Friday, huge, we are training over 600 staff members. When you came in, you saw all the binders at the top of the stairs. That's getting ready to go on Friday. And a big focus will be our writing framework that we have written so that students hear the same language starting in kindergarten about focus. We're still talking about that in 8th grade. Having support, having word choice and style and conventions and what that looks like so that each teacher isn't creating instruction in and of just that microcosm, that we're working together as a system to make sure that this works. We also created a reflection guide that administrators and classroom teachers are using to reflect on best practices when they go in and look for literacy instruction or look at their own math instruction, and that's being used K-8. We recently just did a whole lot of training on assessments so that every single student in our elementary buildings is getting an individualized reading level assessment to know where they're at, whether it's below or above or in between, and progress them and make sure that they're making adequate progress. With all of that, it's taken a lot of training to be able to do that. And on the back side of that sheet kind of highlights some of the professional development. And this is just the face-to-face things that we've done from the beginning of August until February. It doesn't include all of them. It is a summary. But one of the biggest changes, instead of having staff come to us, we've been doing a big shift in going to them. One of the things that we did this year is we did caffeine and curriculum sessions. And we went to each of the elementaries where they're having to do all the new math and the new report card and all of those things to provide support, hear what was going well, hear what wasn't going well, and provide some on-site PD. Lee Cook over here has been doing tech topics at schools, and to date she has done 84 on-site trainings with staff members on the incorporation of technology here. We've gone to the middle schools to do reading framework trainings. We also are starting to go digital with our trainings. Lee has created a technology site that people can go on, and it's midnight and I can't remember how to do the scissor tool and what am I going to do. So they have a place to go to and can watch a video or have a resource, and it's ready when they are to be able to learn that. We also are training people to do the training when they go back out. So we're working on reading frameworks and having the reading teachers do that and then present that back at the buildings. Before we get started here, I do want to thank my department. This has been an enormous amount of work as we've gone through and done that. Lee's done a really great job. Joan's doing a tremendous things with middle school. Julie's provided all kinds of assessment. Stacy's writing all of those things. Meredith's within that. Also, you know, Karen and Eric are working on the technology part. So I do really want to acknowledge them. They're doing a great, great job. Let's get started. I know you're wondering about this. You may be wondering, Faith, why do you have a crystal ball up there? And the reason is that curriculum has really, really changed. It used to be that you had a pretty good idea of what students needed to be successful. You had a pretty good idea, and you worked backwards, and you took some of it at 12th grade and 11th grade, and you worked all the way back down to kindergarten, and we had a really good idea, and it didn't change dramatically. Now when we sit with teams and we say, okay, what's the world going to be like in 20 years? If you think about what happened to Pluto, some of the science and the things that we've taught has changed. Some of the careers that our kids are going to have, we can't even imagine right now. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about, all right, I got to write and I got to design curriculum, and I don't know what it's for yet. So the reason that curriculum has really changed is it's not so much about content, it's about skills. And we've spent time as a board talking about 21st century skills. I spent a little bit of time talking about that at Engage 200. And it's really getting specific about 21st century skills. And these 4 terms are kind of overused, but this is what we're working on. If we can have our students be able to think critically, be creative, collaborate, and communicate, they're going to do well. Content and that kind of thing is still important, but unless you can use it to do those things, we're not going to be very successful at what we're doing. So it's kind of changed not only how we do instruction on curriculum, but it's changed instruction too. When I taught, I worried a lot about what I was doing. I was the teacher. I was the presenter. I was the person that talked the most in the lessons. We're learning that that doesn't help. Kids need to talk. Kids need to do the doing. So the instruction has really focused from not what teachers are going to do, but what work and what students are going to do. So let's dive in a little bit further. We're going to kind of have you be students in some regards. This is something that almost all of our classrooms do on a daily basis. We post learning targets. Research says if you are really upfront with what you want students to be able to learn, they have a much better chance of actually accomplishing it. And you'll see that it's not just specific to content, I'm going to have you apply critical thinking skills. I'm going to have you collaborate. I'm going to have you create and communicate, because again, it's those skills that we want students to be able to do. So we're going to look at our 4 PLC questions and the data that we've done. The very first one, what do we want students to learn or be able to do? We have created a Google site that all of our teachers are able to access from wherever. I have tested it on a beach myself. You know, that you're able to get in, look in, see what it's going to look like, and then also that teachers can share on that. The second part of that is how are we going to know when it's been mastered? And then that leads down into that differentiating piece, because we have some students who knew it when they walked in the door. We have other students that are still struggling. And that second piece we spent a lot of time on this year, because it's not an assessment that you wait until the end of the year or the big unit test. It's quick assessments that you can turn around and then be able to use to drive instruction. So we're going to look at our PLC data. You have a hard copy in your folders. I don't expect you necessarily to be able to see this. You are going to have to answer some questions about this in a couple of minutes. So you'll be wanting to look at this. And I just want to remind you that this survey is given to all staff, and the data that's on here is from the middle of the 12-13 school year and then on to the most recent data from this January. So, you ready to play a little bit? We are going to have you do some interaction with quizzes here on your computers, and you are going to have to enter a game pin in just a little bit, and we'll show that number up on the screen. You're also going to have to put in a nickname, because your data is going to show up on the board. So we encourage you not to put your own name unless you think that you're going to be the absolute winner and you want to brag. But we're encouraging nicknames. Know that the nicknames will show up, so please be appropriate. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into Kahoot. So coaches, if they're not already there, go ahead and do that. It's going to be really important that you look up here, because the questions and the answers are going to be up here. Your computer is just like your buzzer at this point. So you're going to have to pay attention up here on the screen. Give a few minutes to get everybody on. It's coming. That's the number you need to put in. Okay, we're getting a few more players. They're all showing up.
While we're doing this, I was in a 5th grade classroom at Bauer 2 weeks ago and saw this going on in the classroom.
Well, that's everybody up there? Not yet. All right. Very good. Okay, I think we can. Is everybody from the board at least on under a nickname? Okay, remember that you need to look up here. You're going to be asked to look over the first graph and answer some questions. All right. Here's your first question is going to be up here. You will need to look off of your data that you have on your chart. Okay, here we go. We're going to do 4 questions. There'll be a break in between each. All right. There are the answers. Which level has the highest use of formative assessments? It is indeed elementary. We will go on to the next question. As speed does count, but we're going for accuracy. Okay.
I've already looked at it all.
All right, question 2. Here it is. The answer is high school. There we go. Very good. Yes, all of this can be done on phones too, as well. All right, we'll go on to the next question. Now you want to look at the chart at the bottom half of the page. Which level has used PLC data to meet the needs of students above level standards the most? That's fine. All right, the answer was elementary. Good, we're going to go on to our 4th and final question. Ooh, and we do have a tie going into it. Yes.
Yeah, we both were able to get more.
This is wrong on we all. It says middle was correct, is what it says.
Next question. All right, which percentage of elementary staff better met the needs of low students in 2013-14? So if the teacher did put in a wrong answer, like just happened, we do get the data back and you can go ahead and make that correction. One of the great things about a tool like this, you can imagine instead of me giving out all of those answers, then taking the time, grading each of them, and then deciding which of you had mastered being able to look at that chart and be able to do that, that might take until the next day. If I use something like this, it pops up immediately. Those students that got all 4 questions right, here's something that I want you to do. Those students that got 2 right, here's something to do. Here are those students that I really need to go and work with because they don't quite understand how to analyze this information. It also goes on and gets feedback about which of these were most useful to you, but we're not going to spend more time on Kahoot at this time. So we're going to go back to my Prezi. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to use technology differently. The technology that we just used, you could do a quiz and a game show, an assessment, thing like that without technology. We will also want to be thinking about how to do this differently and how to do the collaboration piece of that. Without the use of technology, collaboration usually is in kind of an oral form. You talk, you go through and you look at that kind of thing. And that writing piece is really difficult to be able to collaborate on. And also our teachers went through school being very individualized. We went through school kind of closing the door and working by ourselves. We're pushing with the PLC process that they work in collaboration and work in teams. And we also have to learn how to do that as adults and get comfortable with that, and then be able to do that with our students. And I'm going to share with you something called Google Doc. And it is, I'm going to give you an example of it, and then I'm going to actually ask you all to collaborate on one Google Doc. And this piece is very simple because it kind of looks like a Word document, but it allows us to simultaneously, if we want to, be in different parts of the world, different parts of the offices. I can collaborate with another principal on a document, and we don't ever have to travel to see each other. It also allows us to work from home. It allows us to not have to, well, do you have the latest revision? Because I need to send it to you. All of that type of thing has been really, really powerful to do this. So I first have a quick example of an imagination, use your imaginations, that Rod and Bill and I are working on a joint project about instructional technology. So you can just kind of sit back and watch what it looks like, and then we're going to do one with you. So you kind of get the idea that multiple people can be working on something at exactly the same time. And when this happens in the classroom, there's an immediate audience for the students writing. I'm no longer writing just on my own, and I'm not sure who's going to read it and when. Immediately, my peers can see it. Immediately, my teacher can see it. You have that whole critical thinking piece that is so important in writing, of reflecting, revising, seeing somebody else's perspective, and then building on that. And that's really the skills that we are trying to accomplish as well. So in a few minutes, I am going to have you use this Google Doc, and I'm going to give you some resources to go through, but I want to kind of explain the task before I let you go on the resources. So we have come to the realization here in District 200, as it says up there, that teaching skills is more important than just teaching content. And our learning environment needs to be transformed then into doing things differently than what we're currently doing. You're going to go through and look at a variety of resources, and I'll show them to you in a minute. And you're going to list the source there in the column, and your marker will show up. Now, we decided to go the anonymous route, and we won't even put this up here, so people will not know. So please be appropriate again. I will not be able to know, but I'll walk around and find out. In the classrooms and things, we would go ahead and have assigned so we would know who is contributing to what. And then I want you to list your key learning or your talking point from either the video that you see or the piece of research, and then why it's important. And we're wanting each person to start in a new row. You know, don't continue and try to write over top of each other, then it gets kind of messy. We're not going to hold you to, citation of things there in the source. We're teaching students how to cite evidence and how to do that. You can do a quick abbreviation for whatever your source is. The most important thing is getting to that talking point and why it's important. So now I'm going to preview just a little bit on what resource you're going to have. You should have a tab called Symbaloo, and this is what it'll look like when you pull it up. And what Symbaloo allows teachers and instructors to do is take multiple resources on one topic and put it all together. And you're going to kind of have the feel of what it looks like to be in a differentiated classroom. Because we're going to expect you, there are the 4 there at the top. Lee, my Vanna here, is showing you. Those are the 4 that we want everybody to click on and have experience. Some of them are videos. That's why you have the headphones. so that you can hear that and not bother everybody else around you. So we want everybody to experience those 4. Then after that, you get to choose where you want to go. The things at the top of the screen tend to be more easy and basic. If you go toward the bottom of the screen, they get a little bit more complicated and involved. So you can choose whether you're kind of at the beginning surface level or whether you really want to dig down deep. It's also on the left-hand side is videos. So if you prefer sitting back and having a video, that's all the things on the left. If you're over here on the right, that's more articles and things to read if you prefer that way of learning. And down in the bottom is a lot of research if you're really into that. And in a few minutes, we're going to just have you work through and watch and interact with those 4 things at the top. Make sure that you're taking time after you've read or after you've reflected to enter a few statements on your Google Doc, because we're going to be creating this document together and everybody's going to be building, and you'll see what everybody's writing as it pops up. I'm going to give you some time to do that. Lee and I are going to walk around and we just want you to interact and guide your own instruction. Go ahead and start.
Sound, the turn.
That's right.
I have to see if I've not seen something, because I'm trying to look at it.
These 4, yeah, and then these are videos to explore, those are more. This one's, these can teach these. These little, it makes it into handwritten, you can type it, I guess. Depends on whether it's important, because I don't know when we have to come out. So they can choose. I've done that yet. Yeah, some of
Inspiring, guys.
I watched all four, I read all four.
Right, you get follow directions, that's what you should start with.
Right. I'm gonna look today at the signature.
I'm not very good direction. You're not very good at You're just showing how you put different resources up.
It's there.
Just see what we're doing to show.
It's
So you can see different, normally what's really nice is when you're logged in, it'll say that now everyone's in autonomous, but you can see like which of your classmates are kind of where. It's really kind of good. It's very interactive. When you go and click down here, no one's area. Click on it.
There.
with a virtual tour.
How to what?
Right.
You want to highlight you want the whitelist there? Oh, right click over. This is great. We have the mouse over.
This is great.
Sorry, go ahead. Then is the size thing right there? This one right here. So it's actually highlighted there.
Right now we're just doing
Size is right here. You can see it. Look around. I'll show you. Yeah, because I'm automatically moving down to this page.
This one likes time covering here.
basically.
Or you have any else besides District 200? No, this is my new
Once they're out, you can add to like your
What kind of stuff? I am general. We do a little bit of what never know when they might be converted to
What percentage of the 70 are
Integration.
Get the board on board. The house we found was really interesting, because rather than coming in and saying, here's the house that costs around this much.
It wasn't, and some comments were received.
Mary Ann. Space and
To find out who hired that, and then you should. Yeah.
By doing it here or across?
He works out there.
There's got to be a limit. Keep too busy. Get 30 people, maybe it's not enough.
We're just trying
And then, yeah, then we're going to do you like what I said down there? She thinks of a better way to phrase it.
So we're going to give you 5 more minutes and
Put a question mark in yours.
symbol and this is
Well, they didn't, I know. I did too. I went to, East Lyme.
I actually, I mean, I too type kids home, but I got Brown, Brian, Badger, and all that stuff. Because I remember, copy. A lot of variation now is just, I used to have a tendency to share down, but I don't need it, but I have that. And I, you know, I'm not 100% with my hands, you know, home row and now it's easy. Some big things, but because it's different, you know, no one's ever sitting down and saying, to be able to do it faster and look, turn it into with a refresh. She even brought her own yearbook. Only after I made that comment, we got the lights on.
Not this floor,
There's someone in here. So I don't
Recently. You can pay for extra, but anything to go and become president.
Starting
That's another reason we use email for kids.
Oh, wow.
So we have email, but they can sign up
And the
for a
result
account.
does matter, sometimes it just depends. Sometimes it's a
The fifth grade. Washington, Lincoln children, that they use beta president. It's a funner way to make it feel. Same concept. You don't know where it goes. Videos. But just now, more and more because it's we kind of realize society doesn't have to use a pretty good way.
Her daughter's Brittany. So how was your, because her daughter went to school with my son.
There were bits and pieces around it, like the higher end, like the magnet schools, so the higher end doing it, you know, teachers
Or is that one you guys?
for ages. It was interesting. Jake, you know, And it was in the teacher go around and facilitate, say, no, you don't do that.
All right, when you get to the end of your video, go ahead and close, because we're going to wrap this up. I know you've got another something you talk about yet tonight. So what we have on the screen is our Google Doc that we created, but I also wanted to show you here on the right-hand side, we would have students all be logging in so we would know who put in what. We can go through and look at the revision history and know what was edited at 8:18 and where that happened. So if a student goes through and puts in something that, you know, was maybe off or that kind of thing, we know that. But I also can go through and be like, oh, I really liked your first, you know, comment or where you're at with that. You also saw that I was able to go in as a teacher and post comments on the side. And as we've used this with students, they've really reflected and given a lot of positive feedback. I didn't wait and the teacher didn't see it and I get a final grade. It was part of the revision. I felt better about my end product because I was getting feedback from students and from my teacher along the way, which of course is a lot more about critical thinking and the creative process than one and I'm done on that. Or Siri, good. So what I'm hoping that you got out of all of this this evening, we've got a great document that we can look back on for talking points to our future.
Dinosaurs?
No, not at all.
Everybody's at a different point in the continuum.
Right. We think you did really, really well. But if you can kind of think about kind of a more traditional way of doing this, I would have been doing most of the talking. I would have decided what video we were going to see. Way back when I went to school, if we read something, we might even read it at the same pace out loud. And that's really hard for some students and really process really fast, or those students that have to repeat and go back. It's much better to go at it at your own pace. So not only is the pacing different to do something like this, it was also geared toward your interest. If you learn better from videos, you have that there. If you were, oh, this is really kind of shaky, I want to stay at that easier level, great. But if you're like, I've already seen these first 8 videos, I'm going to go down to something that I haven't seen before, you could drive that. And we still kept everybody together that they saw those 4 main things so we could have a group discussion. But after that, you launched it and you were in charge. And that's kind of the difference of where we're going with what we need to do. You were the collaborators, you created, you were communicating. It wasn't me as a teacher that was doing it, because again, it's the skills. We wanted you to learn about technology, but we also wanted you to apply those skills. We have a group that's just started here in the district called FIT, the Future of Integrated Technology. There are many of us around this table that are on that committee, and our job right now is not to think about what tools we're going to purchase and how we're going to use technology. We're spending a ton of time thinking about what instruction should look like, what the environment should look like. Some of you may be interested enough in the Symbaloo that you're like, well, I'd really like to spend time outside of class looking at that. And if you shared the Symbaloo, I can do this on Sunday morning. People could do this while they're riding a bus on the way home. Becomes that you can do learning anytime, anywhere, at your own pace if you set things like this up. So we're spending quite a bit of time thinking about what the learning environment should look like to get our students to be at doing these skills. That's our first endeavor. And then to think about what tools, some of them are technology, some of them aren't, to be able to get our students at this level. Why are we there? Future's changing fast. I used to have a really good crystal ball as a curriculum person. I could say, yes, this is the content they need. My son reminds me on a nightly basis, I'll just ask Siri. I don't have to memorize that stuff anymore, Mom. Some of that's true. But this is a higher level. He's got to apply it. He's got to be able to do all of these things at a much higher level. And that's what we are working together as a District 200 to make sure that whatever that future is, our students are going to be prepared and be successful. Thank you very, very much for playing tonight. Thank you very much, coaches and buddies. We really appreciated the opportunity.
I think we have just a thanks again to Faith and Lee and Rod and all of the curriculum staff here around the table for your time on this. I think as board members, and certainly if we have a few minutes for questions, we certainly want to get into our next topic here in just a few minutes. When we talk about professional development for staff, right here is what we're talking. You just saw a sample. This is a brief sample of what can happen in any classroom in the district at any level. Kindergarten, 12th grade physics, okay, everything in between. And you know, you can just imagine the possibilities. Now, it's not about what the device is. It's not about what, it's about the instruction, about the tools that are available. So, you know, I thank you very much for your time and effort here. And we're on a journey, okay? You never arrive. And I don't want to misguide the board. And I say this to staff all the time. You know, it's about the journey. It's about constantly looking for new tools and new options and new improvements and how to be able to do these things. 12 months from now, we may have 6 different tools here, you know, to be able to use. Another thing I want to point out and certainly open up for some questions. A year and a half ago, we couldn't do this. I think everybody knows that. We have made significant progress in all of our buildings across the district. Now, would we like to do a heck of a lot more of this? Sure we would, all right? And that's what we're trying to constantly try to find solutions for that. But, you know, we couldn't do this a year and a half ago. We didn't have the infrastructure. We certainly didn't have enough devices. We're you know, at a point now where, again, we're starting to, the possibilities in staff's hands is amazing. So thanks again. And if there's any board comments or questions before we move on, certainly we can have some discussions.
I have a couple. Number one, would this, I'm sorry, this page here, the curriculum update for 13-14, would this or has this changed because of Common Core?
Would the curriculum update have changed? Definitely. As we've gone through, and last year and since I've gotten here, we've worked on the new math standards, and we rolled that out to all of K through 7th grade last year, wrote new assessments to go along with them. Did a lot of training on staff on the differences, some of which was dropping probability, adding a lot more algebra. We have now been working for a year and a half to look at the new reading, writing, language arts standards. We are training 680 some people Friday on that. And the real big differences with the Common Core standard is an increased rigor in text. A lot of the standards of the skills stay the same. For example, we work on drawing inferences from 2nd grade all the way through till high school, but the text level changes. And what was grade level in Illinois after about 2nd grade is no longer grade level with Common Core. It's a much higher level of text. Another difference in Common Core that we're training staff on is that there's a lot of correlations between reading 2 texts at the same time and then being able to analyze and draw comparisons, where we really had done a lot of just looking at 1 text at a time. So a higher level of critical thinking, and then writing is very much more a priority with Common Core than it was with the Illinois State Standards. And that's going to be the bulk of our professional development for staff on Friday with this new writing framework, new writing prompts, how all that looks.
As a follow-up to that, would one-on-one technology change this document? Would it alter substantially the new curriculum?
The curriculum is just a list of what we want students to be able to know and what skills we want them to have. So the one-on-one devices wouldn't dramatically change what skills we're hoping to students to learn. It would be a tool. I do believe that with one-on-one devices we could do a lot more effectively. We could do, as we did today, a lot more differentiation. Definitely the devices are engaging, but it's not going to change dramatically. We still want students to collaborate. We still want them to communicate. We still want them to create. It's just a tool that helps us do that better. Let
me give you an example. I was in a high school biology classroom at Wheaton North last week. science classroom. It was actually a co-taught environment where we had several IEP students as well as regular ed. It was blended. The teacher in the classroom had a document camera, a little bitty camera up on the desk, and the students went up with 5 questions. They scanned it real quick. They got their, if they got 4 out of 5, they had to go back and fix the one before they could move on. So it was all about vocabulary. It was really, and Common Core hits hard on vocabulary. So this teacher was not only focused on reading here, and then they regrouped every time. So the kids that got 5 out of 5 moved on. The other 3 or 4 regrouped. And this was at Wheaton North in a high school biology classroom. And the Common Core component here was the mastery expectation of vocabulary and what was going on in that particular content area in that classroom. This was a co-taught environment. We had a special ed teacher in there as well as a regular ed teacher. So it was kind of a unique scenario, and where the differentiation was so important, that class could have never moved forward. And the short time I was in there 10 minutes, about 15 minutes tops. And I mean, it didn't take long to figure out what was going on and how the learning was self-directed. It was, moving forward in a different way. That's just something I observed last week.
I just wanted to further clarify that we needed to do a lot of the changes in writing and the updates in math. The district wondered whether or not Common Core came. I think the biggest change is the speed of which that happened. We're doing back-to-back language arts and math adoptions of new standards, and for elementary staff, because they teach everything. So to revamp how we're doing with math and do English language arts right on top of it would never be advisable, but the speed of which we needed to do that for Common Core. Middle school and high school, it's easier because I can work on science and language arts at the same time, and it's very rare to have a teacher that's teaching both of those. So we would have continued to do a lot of the curriculum updates. Definitely we needed to work on writing regardless of Common Core or not, but the speed of which we're doing this is different.
As far as Common Core, do you believe, as a curriculum person, that Common Core will achieve the creative thinking for the jobs that we don't know will exist in the future more so than what I'll call the 21st versus the 22nd, or 20 versus 21st century learning? Is it more effective in your belief?
The Common Core standards are really a list of skills that we want students to have. It still depends on the instructional practices that we use on whether we are encouraging that creativity. I can teach the multiplication of fractions and not have creativity involved at all. I can also find a very creative way to have students demonstrate that they understand how to multiply fractions. So while the language is in there about Common Core, about having students create or having students analyze, and definitely integration of technology is part of Common Core, and that will use that creativity, it's up to us as educators to decide instructional practices and the work that students do that would foster those skills.
Any other questions or comments? We're going to move on to the other topics.
I just had one comment. Talking about collaboration. If you recall back when I think we were at Edison, we heard about the ROLE program from Rachel Bednarz. My daughter's in that class, and when I went to curriculum that I asked the teacher, what's the one thing you really need? And I expected like more devices, more space, and this furniture. She just wants tables. So, a surprise. But I've had the opportunity the last couple weeks to be in some planning sessions with 3 very high achieving school districts close to us, and they're all talking about furniture, about how that supports collaboration, one-on-one instruction, group collaboration between students. I would like to see, I'm very interested in future discussions here about, and maybe as a complement to the technology plan, how we can incorporate the appropriate furniture in support of that type of activity. Whether it goes into our $2 million and we put into other programs, or however we plan that. I think it's an equally important, maybe not equally important, but certainly very important part of the learning environment. And I've heard it directly from our teachers that it's a barrier. So I'd just like to get that on the table.
Learning spaces is an issue, and that traditional, everybody watched that video there with the 1920 version of the classroom. I mean, what we're doing here tonight would not look very good when you're sitting in rows and columns and in desks. It just does not, lend itself to that.
I visited one of my adopted schools yesterday, Bauer Elementary School, and one of the teachers was using Kahoot and fill in the blank, pick the appropriate word, and it was just fascinating for me to watch, and she described how happy she was to have it, how she could analyze. So, these things are being put into practice in many of our schools, and I was just really impressed with how well the teachers, that I visited were using technology, and I visited special ed classrooms, regular classrooms, the gifted math class, and all the students are working at their own level. They have their, and they're all using technology very effectively. So I was very pleased to see what I saw.
I'm really impressed with District 200 staff. I sometimes trail Lee, and I can always tell the next day if Lee has been there, because the very next day, sometimes the very next hour, our teachers are using what Lee is teaching them and doing. Sometimes we'll do something at a principal meeting, and by the next day at a faculty meeting, our principal has figured out how to do that, and I watch it. I said, when did you learn to do that? Well, Lee showed us yesterday. And then they worked on it that night and are putting these things together. So there is a sense of urgency, and they're modeling that learning anywhere, anytime, and doing a lot of this on their own time.
I know I shared an email with all of you about summarizing the dinner I had with 5 of my teachers on Monday, and how enthused they are about the PLCs, and really are excited about it. And this is all anecdotal. One of the teachers mentioned that the ability to differentiate teaching really shone through when there was a young girl who was a special ed student at the beginning of first grade. By the time she had reached 5th grade, because of the differentiated teaching she had received over the last several years, she was achieving a 90% grade on the math test. And this teacher was just overwhelmed with her. And the second thing that I have heard repeatedly, not only from my teachers, and again, this is all anecdotal, is how excited the staff generally is about implementing Common Core and raising the rigorous standards and pushing our kids to achieve more. I know it's been a struggle, particularly when you're implementing both math and language arts at the same time, particularly at the elementary level. But the elementary teachers I met with did acknowledge it was a struggle, but they were excited about it at the same time, and that was really encouraging.
Do you think the parents realize, are you able, it's in a newsletter, but I wish they could all be hearing this. And I mean, my grandson was like, oh my gosh, we got a lot of work to do here. We got to prepare. And just tell my daughter and son-in-law that, it's all changed. They're in their 30s. And so it's all changed from them. So is there much communication? I know you communicate, but do you think they get it yet?
There's various levels of that. We work with that, but a lot of that is when students go home and talk about what they do or what kind of homework or activities they're doing at home dramatically changes, so that what's at the kitchen table is the best communication. I can send home a newsletter, I can do a video, I've done a webinar. But it's really when they see their students talking differently about school, and they see that, well, I chose to do this during my presentation, or I'm creating a lot more than I am just answering questions that someone gave me to do, I think is how that happens. I know my own 2 children educate me a lot on how their learning style. So as they're doing all these things with technology, like have you been to a museum lately where the displays light up and there are 3- and 4-year-olds sitting there going, this doesn't work. It's a light up screen and it's not meant to do anything but just read, and so they're showing us. And my son, I was trying to do a function with him in algebra, and we're writing all this stuff. He's like, really, Mom? He says, Siri, could you graph the slope of blah, 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 and there it is, ready to go. So they're moving faster than we are sometimes, as long as we listen and we know what tools they're using and what their learning styles and their pace want. Parents will understand where we're going to.
it's a journey, no doubt about it.
Well, I'm just happy that we have the infrastructure, the bandwidth, you know, the network in place to support this because, you know, I think as long as we have that, we can do anything. We needed that so badly, and this has been a quantum leap for us. So thank you for all your hard work, and I know the two of you will be working closely together to integrate technology and instruction, and I just think we're on the right track. Thank you.
And Rod and Lee and Eric and I are working together to lead FIT, so it's definitely a joint venture, and I would second what you said, that when I got here, I was pretty worried about technology. I was used to doing all kinds of email and work at midnight and 2 a.m. and all of a sudden I got here and I couldn't have access to my stuff. I couldn't do email unless Dr. Rammer went in and reset it every morning. I would get up at 4 a.m. I'm like, I can't do my email.
He was in by 5 though. He got
Well,
it.
and there has been so much progress, and as we're building it, staff is using it instant. So kudos to what's been done so far.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you very much. Thank you to my helper, all of our helpers. This was fun.
We're going to let our coaches
Good
move on
experience.
here,
Thank you very much.
unless they want to stay, but certainly understand that got other things ahead of them. The next item also critically important, and I know board members are aware of the issue when it comes to intervention and prevention. And I've asked this evening for Ms. Panopoulos and Dr. Rammer to walk through for the board where we currently are. As far as prevention goes, intervention for at-risk behaviors of students. And I'm going to turn over to them. They're going to share this presentation together. And I think this will give the board an understanding of where we sit today and how we're working with our kids in dealing with some of those behaviors. So I don't want to steal the thunder. I'll turn over to Ms. Panopoulos and Dr. Rammer.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I do want to also recognize in the audience tonight, we have Donna Kozika is our department chair for our social work department, and she has just been very instrumental in what you'll learn about slowly, or shortly, I should say, specifically with some of the parenting programming that we do have, and there's an additional handout along with that presentation that you have. So tonight, Dr. Rammer and I are going to talk about how District 200 addresses risky behaviors. We do that through a systemic approach. As we even heard the last presentation with Faith talking about having our students get ready for 21st century, and more importantly, being college and career ready. There's definitely pieces along that road that could certainly lead a student not necessarily in the right direction. What I mean by that is some influences that might get in the way, and some potential pieces that may impact their problem-solving abilities. So with that, what we are going to present to you tonight is just some various ways in which we have systems in place for students, we have programs, and we also have core curriculum that can address that. Before we begin, I want to just define what those risk behaviors are. We do talk about, the prevalence of drug and alcohol abuse. We also will be talking about some of those interpersonal relationships that students often find difficult sometimes to manage. We often see, and probably more now so than ever, again, following the presentation we just saw, some of that cyberbullying that's happening. The misuse of technology. There's so much social media out there. We all know it's probably a lot easier to send an email to someone, or send a tweet, or send something on Facebook that is just inappropriate, and even more so easy to send because you're not there personally having to say anything to that person. And then lastly, really talking about some of those behaviors that result from mental illness. When we talk about some of those suicidal tendencies or ideations, these are extreme, of course, but we do have them. They do exist, and students do exist students do experience those behaviors. So that systemic approach that I referenced earlier, what we do basically is we try to prevent any of these behaviors from happening. We do that through education, we do that through our curriculum, we do that from early childhood all the way through high school. Through intervention supports. Those intervention supports include either social work or counseling services, group work. We also have collaboration for students. Again, those teams, again, regardless if it's elementary, middle school, or high school, staff members collaborate together and really identify what is it that we can do to support our students. And then we also assess. We're constantly monitoring how that intervention has worked for that student, if we need to tweak or change it up any bit. And then lastly, if there's that need to refer to our outside and community resources. So we definitely extend ourselves beyond our schools if indeed we're not able to support those pieces in our schools. When we go back to our keys of success, as I talked a little bit earlier about reaching those 21st century skills and having students be college and career ready. When we talk about, demonstrating academic proficiency, and surely we can have those influences that students can struggle with having to manage not only their workload at school, but other pieces such as having to go to work and having family concerns, things of that nature. There's a lot of influences and a lot of factors that can affect a student's ability to manage how they solve those situations or manage themselves. In addition to thinking critically and problem solving, which are also very key. And if you remember earlier in the year when I presented on social emotional learning, we really focused on that critically thinking and problem solving. You're going to see tonight that there is an underlying foundation of those social emotional skills that really can have a positive impact on student academic proficiency. We do that again, like I said, through the social emotional learning and having that safe environment. And so you're going to hear again some pieces within that in order to get our students where we want them to be. I mentioned those social emotional learning competencies, and these competencies come from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is CASEL. It's our foundation that we've really been using this year with all of our staff as we implement social emotional learning in the district. Specifically, we've been focusing on adults this year so that all of our adults in our buildings are given that professional development opportunity to really understand what these competencies mean. Because if our adults learn it and understand and know it and can model it, then we know that our students can do the same. The big piece about this wheel is that these 5 competencies, if they all do not work in conjunction with one another, they are so interdependent that if you take one of these areas out, it could, again, lead a student down that path of risky behaviors. We know that happy students learn best, and again, some of us may remember this slide. But again, it goes back to those short-term outcomes and the long-term outcomes. If I take a look at the long-term outcomes, looking at that greater success in work and life, again, 21st century skills, college and career ready. And if we don't have that foundation of those SEL skills, and then the positive climate and learning, again, going back to our social emotional, and having those, for example, our staff having positive relations with students, and really getting to know their students and building those rapport when they're in classrooms, we know that that's going to have a greater outcome with our students. Again, engaging in less risky behavior and more positive behaviors. So building that strong foundation, what we will be really focusing on tonight is, like I said, the district curriculum supports. You're going to hear about community collaboration, how we also reach out to parents, the data collection piece, and then some district committees that support. I'll turn over to Bob.
Thanks, Joy. Certainly one of the things that we have to be about in this at-risk instruction is it needs to be a collective effort. It's not something that we can do our own. The schools can't do it by ourselves. We need the parent involvement, we need law enforcement involvement, we need community involvement. Public schools certainly have the opportunity, we have the resource, we have the time with students to help with instruction and provide information. But we're not with them all the time. Back in the mid-90s, a guy by the name of Bill Oliver, there was a huge push, same kinds of topics back then. And Bill Oliver put together a program called Parent to Parent. And it was nationwide, and it was about helping parents understand working with their kids, talking to each other, calling your son's best friend's parents about parties and that whole conversation. And Bill went around the country to help parents become engaged in preventing these risky behaviors. And he described a model that I think is very powerful as we think about this in how to address these behaviors, particularly those leading around alcohol and drugs. And here's what Bill said. If you would take a child's life from birth to 21 years old, all right? 0 to 21 years old, compress it into a 60-minute clock. So a person's life from birth to 21 equates to 60 minutes. How much time is spent in formal education? And he would say formal education, he would include preschool, it would include church school, Sunday school, Saturday school, all of those kinds of formal instruction, including public education. So out of 60 minutes out of a person's life from 0 to 21, how many minutes would be spent in formal education of some sort? What would you get?
10 minutes.
5.5.
Well, 5.6 minutes, so there it is.
I hate these eager beavers that bring this up.
Gifted.
Cheaters. Right, 5.6 minutes. And so what Bill's emphasis was, parents, they're in school that amount of time. When they're not in school, who's engaging with them? Who's watching students? Who's making sure what they're doing before and after school, on the weekends, during breaks, summer vacations? Schools can provide a help for it, and they better be providing the help. But you need to be engaged in what's going on as well. And so, I think as we think about this, and as the slide you saw before, it's a big picture. It's a big picture. It's a societal issue. We've talked about the heroin issue, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's a societal issue. It's a community issue, and it's something that everybody has to be a part of if we're going to get a handle on it. Here's the intervention triangle, and you've seen these triangles before. And this kind of describes the interventions, if you will, the issues that we provide in our school district. And certainly the universal, at the base of that triangle, from early childhood to the middle and high school. We talk about those decision-making skills in our early childhood and our elementary. How do you make good choices? How do you say no? All of those things. And we move into the middle school and high school about specific drug and alcohol, mental illness, and those issues. As we move up the triangle, we get to social work groups, those bigger groups that need some interventions, and we're going to talk a lot about our social workers, and we can't give Donna Kozica and her staff any more credit. We can't give them enough credit for all the things they've done. And they kind of lead that whole target within that group, and then certainly at the top of that level, the social work and our intervention group for those individual needs that need individual kinds of attention for those aberrant behaviors. We get into the instruction, we talked about curriculum, and you saw on that slide the curriculum piece. Here's kind of an example of what our curricular focus looks like, certainly in the area of drug and alcohol prevention. We started formally in terms of drug and alcohol. Now, you saw on that slide before at the elementary and early childhood, decision-making, making choices. Those are the foundation that you have before you get to this issue. So at the 6th grade level, there's a 2-week unit. They talk about the gateway drugs, if you will. They talk about opiates. They talk about heroin in 6th grade. It's not a new topic to our schools. Hazardous health, prescription drugs, kind of lay the foundation in terms of that content as it relates to choices and opportunities for kids. 8th grade, it comes back again and it drills deeper. It takes that foundation, goes deeper into those topics, drug classification, pharmaceuticals. We come back to the opiates and the heroin issue. We talk about trafficking, current usage. You get into inhalants. You heard about the inhalant use and the steroid use. Young athletes are beginning to talk about that. We talk about the progression of alcohol or drug movement from tobacco to additional drugs. And at the 8th grade level, they bring in heroin addicts from Serenity House and from other resources to talk to kids about, here's what I did when I was in your chair that got me to this, and it ended up as a heroin user and what that looks like. And they get it firsthand already in 8th grade. We get to 10th grade, it becomes a bigger unit. It's a 6-week unit. It talks about drug classifications and misuse, the interaction in the brain. What does this stuff do? Why is it so intriguing? What's so exciting about it? What happens chemically that makes these things happen? It talks about tolerance and independence, and certainly provides that opportunity for information about assistance. Where do you go And what are those places where I can send a friend or family or myself if I need to? We come back to that decision making. We started that at the elementary level. We come back to that decision making process about how do you make those choices and get out of those situations. Spent a lot of time with some resources. These are just some of the resources. Faces of Addiction, a Johnson Foundation video, which is a very powerful one. Talk about ecstasy, the date drug, if you will, that was a little more prevalent a while ago, but is certainly still out there. The heroin presentation, the ABC film that's been out there, another powerful issue about the heroin, crystal meth, illegal drugs, and then once again they go to Serenity House, bring heroin addicts in, recovering addicts obviously, to talk about here's what it looks like from a face that's similar to yours. You know, it's different when, you know, an old fogey like me talks to kids, but when they have somebody closer to their age that says, here's what I did, here's what happened, and here's the result of those kinds of behavior. That's a powerful message. We also go, besides the instructional for our students, we have that outreach to our community family, and Joanne talked about your handout, and this is tells you the kinds of programs we've been doing. We've been doing this for 13 years. We've been going to parents, and particularly with the leadership of Donna and her staff, going to parents and help them with a variety of instructional things, not just drug and alcohol, about parenting issues, about how to say no to your teenager, how to talk with your child about internet safety, about bullying, about balancing time, about studying, including the drug and alcohol things. Just so that you understand that our staff in District 200 is serious and conscientious about this, and as we said, we've been doing these parent things and school things for a long time. These are not new initiatives for us. I don't know if you've heard of a guy by the name of Chris Herron. Chris is a former professional basketball player, played for the Lakers, and is now a recovering heroin addict. Chris has done some speaking all over the country. As a matter of fact, in I think it was November, Mike Healy, who was an assistant principal athletic director at Wheaton Warrenville South, heard about this program and took his boys to listen to Chris in Downers Grove. And was so touched and moved by it, and his kids said, Dad, this is something we have to bring back here. And so Mike and his staff put together the resources, and Chris Herron is not cheap. This is an expensive program. Went out and did fundraising, went out and did sponsors. Chris is coming to our community on the 17th of March, 7 o'clock at Wheaton Warrenville South, and then we'll be in the full student assembly on the 18th. Chris was a very successful high school basketball player, kind of a superstar, had it made, full ride to college, got hooked early. The infamous part of his story is as a Laker. He would go out on the street in his warm-ups, in his Laker warm-ups, buy his heroin, and then go play. It got to the point where he needed that fix in order to play, and finally washed out, and washed out several times before he made it and before he finished. It tells a powerful story to parents, community members, and kids about what happened. It is an incredibly gut-wrenching experience. It says early on, I sat where you did when I was 17 and thought, it doesn't affect me. I just go have some beers with my buddies. And then tells his story, how he lost his family, his kids, his wife, and ended up where he did. It really hits home. But the point of that story is, that's something that our staff saw and said, we need to bring this here. We're going to bring this to our community because we need this in our community. It's that outreach. I know Mrs. Intihar, a few weeks ago, was at the ROE. And the ROE, and I'm sure you've seen the publicity that our coroner and chairman have talked about. They had a seminar, a summit, if you will, on heroin addiction. This is a resource instruction book that we've copied and sent to all our health teachers. It's kind of upgraded. Donna and her staff were a significant part. Again, people in District 200 are on the cutting edge of these things to help put this together for the county, to provide additional resources for our staff to help address this issue in DuPage County, as well as the attending problems that are surrounding it. Surrounding communities, we've done additional resources in those with surrounding communities back on the 4th of February. Met with the police department and talked about that. Our social workers in the ROE task force, as we talked about. That coalition on heroin we had in January is a kind of a unified, that's back to that community has to be involved in this issue.
So that evening, right, a part of that evening too was also a recognition for students who participated in a contest. So students of our high schools and any other DuPage high schools were given an opportunity to present information either through a poster or through a video that was a campaign against heroin. And so we had a second place winner, and that was from Wheaton Warrenville South, Alyssa Hendrickson and Josh. And then we also had our third place poster winner, who was Carly Podnar from Wheaton North. So her poster's there, and I'm going to go ahead and let our video show. You'll be amazed.
I had it all. I was the star on the basketball team, going to Indiana. I had a wonderful job, paid really well. And my family was the best family anyone could ever ask for. And my friends, they would always stick by me. They were the best I could ever get. But one day everything changed. My best friend, he told me to come see him. Said he had something for me, something that would put me on top of my game. I didn't think anything could be taken from me, but it happened all so fast. I lost my job. I lost my basketball scholarship. My own family even, they told me to get out of the house. And my friends, all of them, they said they didn't want to be seen with me. Don't waste your life with heroin.
So those students are in second place. We're very proud of them, and they were recognized that evening. So again, just very appreciative that our students are taking part in this as well. Another one of those bubbles that I had shown when we talk about the foundation, about really addressing all of this, is that data collection piece and how we monitor and how we assess. And two ways in which we do that, specifically at our middle and high school levels. One way is through the Illinois Youth Survey, and that's a survey that's that's offered out to school districts in Illinois every 2 years. This is our year actually to take it, and so some of our schools have already begun. Our middle schools are actually taking it this week, next week I should say. But for the most part, that survey is a series of a 45-minute survey that really addresses those risky behaviors that we talked about earlier in the presentation here. And so we really get a lot of great information from that. We gave the survey out 2 years ago, and our staff have used that data at the middle and high school levels. And again, this is at 8th grade, 10th, and 12th grades. But the PLCs have been formed specifically with those appropriate staff members, social workers, counselors, psychologists, etc., and really have delved into the data and saw, okay, what is it that we need to be looking at and focusing in our schools? And so from that, they've been able to design either some additional types of interventions or outreach for parents, outreach even for students in those schools. The benefit for us now taking this survey again is the longitudinal data that we'll be able to gather now and really take a look and compare for those students from 10th to 12th grade or from 8th to 10th grade. And then this year specifically, our freshmen were all surveyed and asked to really give their input about their perceived needs, concerns, stressors, and any of the resources that they could get in order to go for help. And that's been very well received. Both high schools have done that. And again, that information's gone back to those counselors and the social workers, and they're continuing to make sure that students are feeling that relationship in school and that they have a place to go if they have concerns, questions, whether it's academic, socially, any type of interactions with other peers and things of that nature. So it's been a survey that they've found to be very beneficial.
And finally, the community outreach connection. Here's another piece of how District 200 is engaging with the community to address not only risk behaviors, but certainly the drug and alcohol piece. We have our District Safety Committee, and I'm sure you all know that that's a committee that's been in the district for a long time. It's comprised of representatives from all the first responding police and fire departments from all the communities that service District 200, administrators from all levels, school districts that are not district but private parochial schools are sit on that committee. And in addition to the conversations about fire drills and stranger danger and lockdowns and all of those kinds of things that we do every year, we also talk about opportunities for intervention. Things that are going on in the community that we hear from the police department, or we share with them about, here's what we hear is going on in the community, what can you tell us? What can you tell us about the drug trafficking going on? What are the initiatives that are happening? What are the things that we should be looking for? And share that information so that not only we, but them are understanding about what we're getting from both sides, and we can use it as our instruction and our watchful eyes in school, and they can see that we hear in school that what's going on out in the community. Crisis response team, another group headed by Donna and her group, where an issue happens in a building, a death, for example. We've had some suicides, parents who have passed away with children, and that response team goes to the school and provides services for students and staff who may have a difficult time with these kinds of emotional and gut-wrenching issues. You've heard a lot of talk this year about social and emotional design team. That's another one of those pieces that provides information and resources to our staff about how to help our kids with those kinds of decisions and that social and emotional thing. And finally, the school liaison officer. We have the two officers at both high schools. As a matter of fact, the school district, we just met with the police department to interview the next round of liaison officers coming in. And one of the questions that we talked about was, in addition to their qualifications and why they want to do it, what are your thoughts about dealing with at-risk behaviors? What are your thoughts about drug intervention? What are your thoughts about things that are happening within our schools and within our community? How would you be a part of that as a new liaison officer? In addition to the conversations about bringing our drug dogs in, as we do random drug checks of our school, and bomb dogs in, and just do those things. That's that community relationship that we have, is that big picture that, again, we can't do it alone, but have to be in partnership with them as well.
Okay, and to wrap it up, the long-term payoff for SEL, and it's not only social emotional learning, but it's everything that we've talked about tonight, that systemic approach and making sure that we're offering those interventions, the education for students. The two bottom bullet points are what I wanted to make sure we highlighted here, because again, we're talking about the better emotional health for those students. Will get better outcomes, better emotional, mental health, as well as a decrease in any substance issues or criminal activity.
I think as board members, it's important to understand we spent the first hour of this evening talking about curriculum instruction. The second part here is about the whole child and making sure kids can't achieve those academic targets if we don't pay attention to this. And we're very aware of the issues in the community right now, which is one of the reasons why I wanted staff to share and provide an update to where we're at. And certainly welcome any questions from the board about where we're headed. This is, again, an ongoing process. It's prevention and an intervention. So it's definitely an ongoing process, and new hot topics come up periodically. And Bob referenced that. 20 years ago it was gangs and things like that, and those types, and that stuff just evolved over time. And right now the hot topic's heroin, because it's a drug of choice. It's the one that's affordable and accessible right now. And certainly there's going to more and more attention drawn to that in our classrooms and our conversations. Question?
Hi, everyone. If we were going to, I think you touched on it a little bit, but let's say over the last 10 years, are drugs more prevalent in use or less in the high school area, let's say?
Now, I would say in terms of in the building, Oliver talked about that years ago, and we talk about it now. Drug activity in our schools, not much at all. In our school. Now, it may happen on the way to school and come in as being under the influence, but because of liaison officers, drug dogs, people watching, cameras, most of our kids go, yeah, this isn't a good place to do that. Now, drug activity among adolescents is changing. When Oliver was starting this, the big issue and the reason for the big push back in the 90s was marijuana. And that was the piece that got everybody excited. So it's progressed from marijuana now to heroin, which is easier, cheaper, and significantly more dangerous. So I think in terms of in our school, yeah, I think it's probably less than it certainly was when this whole thing started, before we put liaison officers in our school and started to be a little more conscientious about it. But in terms of dangerous behavior, our kids are still doing things that they're not supposed to. But the ability, the mobility, the dollars, the cash that kids have, the whole kind of societal changes, those issues are still there. But in terms of behaviors in our building, when I was a principal, we had a lot more issues with kids smoking dope in the building than we do today. If we find kids in our schools with illegal drugs, it's because they brought them or we pass them along, and those are generally the kids that go, they haven't figured out that somebody's watching them all the time. So the incidents of catching it in school are down significantly than they used to be 10 years ago. But the behavior is still going on. They're just being smart about it and doing it someplace else.
Do we educate the parents? I'm thinking curriculum. I'll tell you, when I heard Dr. Jorgensen, the coroner, speak, it put me on a whole different level. Heroin to me was something you injected and so on. Apparently that is not the case today. So I guess, I think there's a fine line at curriculum nights, when the parents come in or whatever, whether we start talking about drugs or not. But, again, I think they're the ones that are going to be more likely to spot it. But if they don't know the symptoms, I guess, that's what concerns me. I surely would not know the symptom based on what I've heard in the last months, as this has become more significant to me. I guess, do we in any way deal with that at the parent level?
If you look at these parent activities, and we've had 6 of those evening sessions for parents in the evening. Some of them not so well attended, but some very well attended. I was at one at North, and we had 65, 70 people in that room. So the word is getting out there, and sometimes if I put my head in the sand, I don't have to know about it, and it doesn't happen. But the word is getting there, and I think because of the exposure, people are listening to it a little more. A lot of people don't want to know. I don't want to know. But I think we're doing what we can to get that into the parents' hands and let them know what those issues are at every opportunity, without being abusive about it, without being heavy-handed about it, because we want them to listen. We don't want them to be afraid, and we don't want them to be scared to come. We want them to listen, and so you have to give it to them carefully when they're ready to listen.
Community education is a joint effort. Schools are a big part of it, no doubt about it. However, as you know, coroner's office, state's attorney, chairman, the ROE, it's a combination, and it has to be multiple times. Top of the fold in the Daily Herald, okay? All of those types of things. You've seen it recently. That's where it's all of those things. It's no one particular medium's responsibility. It's a combination, and we're part of that. We absolutely are part of it.
Yeah, the city, Dr. Harris, in our liaison officer, did one at a city presentation. The president of the DuPage Chief of Police had a program on the city channel. As a matter of fact, had a recovering heroin addict and his parent in there, and there was like a 35, 40-minute presentation on the city channel about just that another avenue. You just got to get them wherever they're ready to listen to it. And so if they're surfing, and they go, I know what that's all about. Just another avenue to get that information out.
I have 2 questions. One is probably pretty easy to answer, and the other one is maybe a little more.
I'll take the easy one.
Okay. Well, the first one is our staffing in terms of social workers, those types of people. I've always had the impression that we're low compared to perhaps other districts, or what would be good. Is that true? What are we at? What should we be at? That's the easy question.
That was easy. Donna could probably answer the exact amount. I know we stretch them very thinly. Definitely there's at least one in each building. I think that's at the elementary level, and then middle school it increases a little bit just based on the programs that are in support, because we really strive to make sure that we're social workers specifically. We start with those students with IEPs, but then they can also work with other students who don't necessarily have IEPs.
I actually think we've come a long way, because we used to be where,
Hold on.
I'll bring it back.
I actually think we've come a long way. We had social workers that would share 2 buildings. I even had a social worker with 3 buildings. We don't have that as we used to. The Illinois Association of School Social Workers says 1 social worker to 450 kids. We're a little bit under that, but really it's specific to schools too with the special education population. I think we're at a good number. If I had my dream, I'd have a couple more, but it's not like we're not doing a good job. And we work in teams too with our psychologists and counselors, and it's really a team effort. So I feel like we're not missing students, and I think that's the critical piece, that we're serving kids.
But I think there's also another piece, is that our pupil personnel are now being required to do a lot more than they had to do before. You know, we talk about increase in severity of our special education population. That takes an incredible amount of time from our social workers and our psychologists and our school counselors. They're spending a lot more time on it. We know we have more IEPs. We know we have more critical issues. These are our go-to people for that. We know we have issues in our building that those response teams have to handle. And that's different than I'm used to be. I'm sorry, it just is. They're our go-to people. Now, are we staff? Sure. Except they're being asked to do more because of the changes in our education and the changes of our kids they did. So, sure, ideally would it be nice if we had more? Absolutely. But we have to do more with these issues. There were the days when say, well, if the kids were just drinking, it's okay, and nobody cared. And we know that's not all right anymore, and we need to lift that boat as often as we can.
Rosemary, I think just a couple follow-up comments in context. When you say we're low, as you have seen the information, we have, we're not overstaffed in any area in this district, okay? So administratively, FT teachers, social workers, mental health staff, anything, okay? I mean, we're lean. I mean, we're appropriate but lean is how I would describe it. Second thing is, and Joanne mentioned this before, one of the efforts that we're working, we've spent the whole year this year working on is making sure all of our teachers understand those 5 competencies, for important social emotional learning. That's where the education, that mentor relationship that goes on in the classrooms every day, that's the key intervention time. That's the piece where you have that relationship with the adult. What we're talking about with mental health staff, that's in that the higher part of the pyramid. Majority of our kids are in that lower part of the pyramid where the constant reminding and intervention piece goes on a regular basis. So it doesn't all fall on the backs of our mental health staff. It really is on the backs of all 1,800 staff we have in the district.
And then the larger question to me is, have we thought about in our community specifically what we see as the major stressors to our students that perhaps are unique to our community? I guess the reason I'm thinking about it is, you said we spent the whole first half of the meeting talking about, academics, and clearly we want our children to succeed there, but then on the other hand, we saw an article earlier this year from Mr. Lucky, I think, who passed along the stressors on high achieving students, and we're a community that has expectations that way. So I guess I'm wondering, is that, are we addressing that specifically? The general knowledge of good relationships with teachers and everything, that's all great, but is there anything that we can pinpoint to say, in our community, this is something we really need to kind of look at?
I just want to say that when we do our parenting classes, we have sometimes 75 parents on a lunch hour, and we're constantly talking about that it's not as important when the kids are in kindergarten and first grade to already be saying you have to get into the best college. It's be the best person that you can be all around, and that's what's important, because a lot of times what we see is the kids, the issues that they have are the stressors that are really in general in society too. Economic stressors, stressors with financial, homelessness, all those things kind of add up to some of the issues that we deal with kids. But it's kind of a systemic thing, and so we're always trying to reach out to parents too. I think in our district we do an incredible job. Even last night, the PTA Council had a cyberbullying and blending technology with parenting. We had close to 100 people last night, and we had a panel of District 200 staff, teacher, and Eric, and myself, and a police from the sheriff's office. So we're constantly trying to give parents an avenue because it's the toughest job there is. And very little training and very little, they're isolated really. So I think in our district, we're always trying to connect with parents and offer them some assistance in a really tough job. And I feel like it's really making a headway.
She takes a tough one and makes them easy.
Thanks.
I do have one question I didn't want. We learned through the 2 community engagement sessions as well that the demographics of our district have changed dramatically in the last 10 or 12 years with the increased percentage of ELL students and Title I students. And that's offered challenges, but in the second session, Faith so forthrightly explained that good professional development will lift the boat for all of our students, that improving teaching skills will help all students and lift them up. So I have a 2-part question. With the changing demographics, is that offering different challenges to you in social emotional, addressing our social emotional problems or issues? And is it the outline that you presented today about addressing that really a uniform outline that can apply regardless of the background or the demographic of the child? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
I think the biggest challenge we're seeing in demographics is mobility. I mean, I think what we see, whether it's academically or behaviorally, students that are in our system, the longer they're in our system, the better they achieve and the better they behave, if you will. When students come to us after being in an environment where rules aren't followed or they're ignored or certain behavior is tolerated, to learn that this is the way we do it here is difficult for them. You know, they come in knowing, I solve things with my fist. Not in District 200, you know. And so I think, you've seen, for the most part, the children you see in a closed session after a board meeting are often students who have come here and not been here very long. And seldom do you see, a senior or junior who's been here all along, because these initiatives have provided the foundation to help kids behave well. I know some of you have been in other districts. I've been in a lot of districts. It's different here. And I'm not being pejorative to the other schools, but if you go to walk into other schools and other districts in our locale or Chicago area, it will feel different. You walk in a building, it will feel different. It's because we have a lot of things in place and good resources to do that. So the population the transient population is hard to get them caught up. If you come in 6th grade, you got 6 years of this stuff that they probably didn't have before. And then to get them caught up in a hurry, that's a challenge.
We just talked about that in the high school principal meeting yesterday. We were just talking about the onboarding, with the mobility factor. That was a topic that we had a brief discussion about, that is a challenge, just yesterday afternoon. And maybe what we can do something, we're just having discussions about how we do it, and maybe we can do some things different. Because of that.
But to add to that as well, yes, the framework that we use or the supports and systems we use would apply to any of our students. The mobility is definitely a key piece in that. And the other piece that it kind of answers some of the other questions from before is with some of our number of students who are homeless has increased dramatically over the past couple of years. And so we've really designed an approach to support those students more than anything that we can by really putting a nice process in place. But again, it relies on our social workers to more or less be a case manager for them. So when those students come into our district, we make sure that we check in, we deem them homeless, and then from there, the social worker of that building is responsible to kind of keep an eye on that student, make sure, and so forth. So, again, those numbers have increased, as well as some of our numbers, and I hate to admit this, but our students who are not able to really manage themselves and are suffering from either depression and moving along the lines of suicidal attempts. So those are definitely pieces that we take seriously, and we reach out to those students as much as we can, but it obviously takes a team to be supporting them. So those are some of those challenges that we are facing.
And I want to kind of, sitting on the SEL design team committee and, listening to what Dr. Rammer and Mrs. Panopoulos said, I do have to say, and just from my own experience and people I know who teach in other districts, first of all, Yeah, I mean, I know a teacher in another district who got shoved by a high school student, and the principal at the high school basically said, well, you're just gonna have to deal with that. And when she told me that, I went ballistic and said, you have a board policy about that, and you better make sure that that board policy is followed and that student is disciplined, because that's not right. So I mean, are we different? Yeah, I think we really are. And I'm very proud of that fact. And do we have a little bit of a ways to go? I think if we had more resources, we could always do more. But I do believe that this SEL approach that we're taking, where every teacher, you know, because you think you're modeling good behavior, but if you're teaching your subject and not teaching your individual students, sometimes you don't realize, you know, what you're doing. And becoming more of a student-focused school district and having our teaching be more student-focused rather than subject-focused, I think is going to really go a long way to help students who are fragile and lend support to what our social workers, you know, have to deal with. So I'm hoping that over the long term, we'll see our discipline incidences go down. They're very low already, but I think, you know, we can always be better. And I think we can help our students. I think it's just really hard because sometimes the parents aren't modeling good behavior at home, and the only people they have to look up to for good behavior is their teachers. So, you know, I don't know. I struggle with it. And I get the other question that I did have is, with all that we're doing to counteract, you know, the heroin problem with our community, if money were no object, what more would we do as a school district?
Good question.
That's a great question. I don't know if there would be anything else that we would need to do.
If time was not a factor, okay, and you know, I mean, Donna alluded to it. I mean, certainly we could double our mental health staff tomorrow, and those people would be working nonstop every single day in every school in this district. I mean, we could do that, and not have people sitting around with something not to do. The needs of kids in society for that type of support is real, and that's not a District 200 issue. That's a societal issue. You know, why substance abuse and why incarceration and all those things, you know, that we know they exist. You know, why they happen, because there's just not enough, you know, supports around those types of things. So I don't know if there's specific answers. You know, curricular-wise, you know, there's never enough time in a day to teach, you know, all of the things that we know need to happen. As Bob said from the very beginning, 5.6 on that clock, you know, from birth to 21. So, you know, if we had another 5 minutes, wow, and the resources to support that, it'd be interesting to see what could happen. And not only in the, you know, learning and teaching arena, but also in the social emotional. I don't know if anybody else has the
And society of mental health. I mean, you know, we've heard the issue about, you know, the homeless, and part of the homeless problem is there's no mental health facilities or mental health access to mental health resources. Well, that goes for kids as well. And so, you know, we're not a treatment facility. We do a lot of counseling and a lot of help and provide and focus kids to treatment. That's not one of our major responsibilities, is treatment. We counsel, we don't provide resources, but it would be good if there were places where we could say, Bob, you know, take your kid and go to this place and get some, you know, clinical help, and there's a way to pay for it. That would certainly, you know, help us as well. We have parents who, you know, we provide opportunities and resources. They can't get there, they don't have money, whatever those issues are. So, yeah, we would take it, but there's some things that the society has to do to help us with that, because we aren't the treatment facility.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I've been to a couple of these parenting seminars, and I'm just wondering, you know, if we look at 100 is people as good attendance out of 13,400. You know, that's not a very good capture of our 25%ers. I'm just wondering if, you know, as we go through this, is there a way to create? And it's kind of hard to find on the website where, you know, where these seminars are, and I know I get them by email. Is there a way to videotape these things and start to build a video library that can easily be gone to, and maybe increase the prominence of these sessions? I just think, you know, you do one tomorrow night, and then that's lost for the people who aren't there. If we built the library over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we could really have a lot of resources available. Maybe the students could do the videotaping and editing and something like that. Maybe it's an opportunity. I just think it, you know, if we talk about trying to get the 75%ers to community engagement, we had the same problem with the 25%ers at these sessions.
Yeah, we started to put if you know, on the website, there is a link to all those community resources, where can you go to Serenity House, all of those kinds of, you know, parent kind of data information. We can certainly take those presentations and put up a camera and shoot them on.
I think it'd be a great, long-standing resource. Sure. You know, something we can.
Good idea.
When our staff's doing the presenting and you know, leading this, it's not a problem. You know, when we have copyright issues, when we have, you know, hired presenters to come in and do it. So we just so you know, we do have to follow that.
And you got to turn it off when the conversation starts. Because these people, you know, come and, you know, they're nervous walking in because they, you know, who's going to see me? So, you know, it would be here's on the panel and the community would be blind or people aren't going to come. You know, they don't want to be seen, oh, you were at that Maryland thing? What's the matter with you? You know, that. So we have to be a little sensitive about it's a touchy topic.
We just have to be careful with that. It's a little different conversation.
I understand. Yeah. But yeah, sure.
I'm certainly glad that we've had this conversation tonight. I'm glad that we approach this in our educational process, and that I think that one of the, you know, our key to success, you know, this is life readiness that we're talking about here. And drug is one thing, but even the whole world of technology, the aspect of access and so on is just so critical to train students, parents, the world a little bit about what's going on here. And it's a thing that we have not done. I mean, in my day, it was you know, the thing we did was disciplinarian only. You know, there was no, you know, if it wasn't a big problem, you didn't deal with it. So I'm really glad to hear this is a piece, a good, solid piece, I think, of our curriculum and activities. So,
but it's coming out of the time that we have to do all the other things. I mean, it's another one of those, you know, it's an important, I would say it's not a mandate, but it's an important responsibility. But we still have that same 5.6 minutes. And that's another thing. Teaching before, it's got to come someplace else, comes out of something. And so that's you know, we're trying to get 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack, and every couple of, you know, years, months, whatever, somebody gives us another potato. It'd be nice if we could get a bigger bag.
And I would say it comes out of that 2 million
Right.
you'd ideally like to see for buildings. And so,
Right.
you know, and I know you referenced, you said, I don't know where all the trade-offs are. Well, you know, you sat around the board table talking about trade-offs like this for all these years. So, you know, at the bottom, education is a student-centered, people-enabled system. And buildings need to be there, need to be taken care of, but when you're making trade-offs, I think that's part of what is taken into account when you have limited resources, and you don't want to increase additionally on those people who are supporting it. So if there were an easy answer to all these trade-offs, we would have done that and gone home and we wouldn't have to be here. So there you go. But I mean, I think this is an interesting evening to have both of these discussions, because it does show, as you say, it's not only 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack, you're trying to put 10 pounds in 2-pound sacks in a way.
Right.
So, yeah.
This is the budget dilemma staff works with every day. And you know, I know board too, but it is. What you saw tonight. We had a little bit of facilities at the beginning, and then we talked about learning and teaching, and now, you know, the mental health aspect. So it's a good array here this evening. Absolutely good point.
I do have a question about the March, was that 17th, huh? On St. Patrick's Day.
You got to get them when you come.
I know. Is that open to the general public?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yep, we're going to send invitations to all, as a matter of fact, to all the DBC schools and anybody there. It's open to the public, to adults, parents. We're getting close to that time, and then we'll begin to do the publicity. So it's open to you all come.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
It'd be interesting for, you know, to see why parents are not celebrating St. Patty's Day, but that's okay. I hope they talk.
Priorities.
There you go. I agree.
Okay, I'll get back to my agenda. Alrighty. Are there any board reports from board members? I have a couple that are contained here in my green folder. First of all, I want to know if everybody got the new school laws. Did all board members get this?
By mail.
By mail? In your mail? All right, I'll see that you get copies, but we should, it's a digest of state laws affecting Illinois public schools enacted in 2013. So I will see that you all either get a copy of this or I'll get a copy made for you.
I believe it's online.
Is it online?
Yes,
All right, then I'll get you the, maybe Mary Lou will send you all the link, if that would be just. All right, thank you. We just need to be aware of this because it changes, how we do our business and may impact what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of it. And that's really all I have to report. Any other board reports? Okay, then I think we're ready for a, I'm sorry? Oh, is there any public comment?
No.
All right, there's no public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's no further business to come before the board in open session, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second.
I allow anybody to move. I don't have to be the mover here.
The wingman.
Mover and the shaker.
I'm happy to do it, but I don't have to do it.
It wasn't quick enough.
All right, moved by Mr. Vroman, seconded by Mrs. Swanson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.